Welcome everybody, ladies and gentlemen, werewolves, vampires, pirates, Carl, Space Boy. This is a very inclusive gathering tonight. Nobody is excluded. You can really come as you are, as you can see you are. Thank you everybody for coming to our night of sinister storytelling tonight. It's lovely to see so many very strange faces here in Bank Street. We're going to do it a bit like this. We're going to do a couple of stories and then give you time to get more coffee, more tea or more beer from the man behind the bar. So there'll be a break in between our stories. But we have here today a very special cast of readers. We have our headline act, Marie-Anne Cope, a fantastic established author. Marie has written all of the books you can see behind me on the shelf. You can buy them from Marie tonight if you wish to and discover more about her dark and sinister world. Please do support your local authors. Please support Anne by buying as many drinks as you can possibly drink during the break. Andy, do you have blood available? No, fail. Do you have werewolf milk?
Yeah, it could be.
No, but he's got some stuff that'll do instead. Do you have any silver behind the bar?
I will once you pay something.
we don't want silver tonight.
Gold will be nice.
All is looking good. We're going to start tonight's performance with the first reader who was the first prize winner in the recent story writing competition. This is David Williams reading Face of Evil. So please put your hands together for David Williams.
Face of Evil. In 1965, the year the British death penalty had been suspended, Detective Inspector Harry Chambers' life reached a point where it too hung in the balance for several nil-by-mouth weeks. Still 5 years shy of retirement, the only golden handshake he would likely cherish in memory now was the last whiskey he poured himself in his office before breakfast at the station canteen, where he finally collapsed after years of service above and beyond the call of duty. Whether it was the final delirium or the latest infusion convulsing him, the young nurse at his bedside couldn't tell. Chambers, however, had his grave suspicions as his booze-battered body lashed at his hospital bed. The doctor and matron rushed in to join them allay, and the door swung open long enough for Chambers to see the chaplain again, relieved of good book and platitudes, now turned away, a dusty halo forming over his head from the cigarillo ring he was idly perfecting. Twisting back to face his restrainers, he saw a figure emerging from the corner of his ward and guessed the end was near. Though the pinstriped, bureaucratic type approaching him, grey-eyed, grey-haired, and bespectacled, perusing a case file, was a far cry from the grotesque angel of death which had been haunting his feverish dreams. There was no doubt in his nature, his purpose. Good afternoon, Mr. Chambers. I'm your liaison officer, sent to evaluate your life and determine what will happen next to you, the phantasm explained civilly over the bedside disturbance. While I proceed, I'd like to ask if there's anything you'd like to know before judgment is passed, within reason, of course. Chambers, seemingly in two worlds, one of hallucinatory calm, the other of bodily confusion, croaked, anything, within reason, came in reply. He already knew what he wanted. It wasn't so much an obsession of his, but in his line of work it was natural that this curiosity kneeled him often in rare moments of sober reverie on duty, and even rarer moments of it. I want to know who Jack the Ripper was, he demanded. I want to see him face to face. I want to hear him speak, to hear his voice, to look him in the eye. Before his ramble ended, the wheels were in motion. The syringe-tapping doctor, the restraining matron, the lip-biting nurse, the ward, the chaplain, the hospital, they all faded away. In their place came a fresh confusion of sound, colour, and smell. The world flickered back into being in zoetrope sequences of carriages and pedestrians. Chambers found himself standing on a pavement, facing a noisy cobbled street pungent with dung and smoke, cacophonous with horse trot and holler of hawkers selling cat meat, watercress and sins of the flesh. Gathering his wits, He looked across the road, and there, leaning against the lamppost, was his intermediary, now wearing a frock coat and reading a paper. He looked up and met his gaze, and as he did so, a carriage drew up nearby. Its passenger alighted, wearing a billowy Inverness cape and top hat, and, with a genial tap of his cane against the cab door, turned on his heels and slipped round the corner of Whitechapel Road and Osborne Street. The intermediary tipped his head knowingly in the man's direction and gave a thin smile. There was a macabre whimsy to this gesture that disturbed Chambers, but no matter, the hunt was on. He shadowed his quarry with the well-practiced doggedness one would expect of a policeman with his years of experience. I would have caught him if I lived here now, he said. I was a good detective. A good detective, he repeated. My record is spotless. The file will show it. On taking a corner blindly, his complacency was broken by a splash of guts at his feet as a butcher emptied a tray of offcuts into the gutter outside his shop. Chambers' polished shoes were now spattered with gore, and he swore at the butcher, who returned inside without a backward glance. The detective caught sight of himself in the window and saw an angry stranger glaring out at him. He eyed a drab bowler, a bearded face, a sack coat with watch chain, and realised his soul was a guest in the body of a denizen of the district, who he imagined would at some point wake up and wonder where on earth he was, and where the hours of his day had gone. But this was no time for idle speculation. He took to his heels and caught up with the black cape down a busy arcade. With his trained eye, he took in what details he could of the near-mythical monster from his careful distance. Average height, slim build. He noted a breezy manner. Certainly nothing distinct about him yet. Nothing to suggest that notorious bloodlust seething beneath the genteel apparel. Where are you heading, Jack? Chambers muttered, buttoning his host's coat higher in the early evening chill. Down narrowing streets he pursued his mark, stopping strategically and peering at his whiskered avatar in shop windows before casually picking up the trail again and blending into the background. This went on for some time, and Chambers grew frustrated at not yet catching a good glimpse of the Ripper's face. It was like chasing a ghost. Hours passed. Day turned to night, and Chambers grew more restless after loitering outside shops and taverns for a seeming age. Still, it gave him time to consider the chances, his chances of passing through the pearly gates after his life's evaluation was complete. If time permits, while the jury is out, he wondered, it wouldn't harm my defence if I succeeded in saving Jack's next victim. Not that I need to, of course, not with my spotless record. And it was all there in black and white, to be found in the earthly cabinet of his superintendent. But if I could intercede at just the right moment, then that brief diversion might be enough to thwart a fatal mutilation. The clock tower struck 2, and at last the tedium ended. Chambers leaned out from an archway and saw the Ripper addressing a brightly bonneted woman outside a dingy coffee house. They looked in agreement, and it seemed a sordid deal was done. The black cape indicated a lodging room opposite and promptly vanished inside it. Chambers saw his chance. He dashed towards the lady, feeling lighter with every soul-saving step. There was no time for propriety here. He would assume she was indeed a lady of the night and divert her presence elsewhere on some vague pretense. It didn't matter what, just enough to save her from the gruesome fate lurking behind that dark door. And once he had saved her, and done his case no harm in the process, not that it needed any help, he would return and catch the demon unawares. Chambers fairly skipped the last few steps towards the painted damsel. The smell of fresh coffee from the urns behind her whisked him up keenly as he opened his mouth to speak. Ah, Millie, there you are, she stopped him. Be a darling and do a turn for the gent in 26 over there. There's tuppence and a hot toddy here for you afterwards. Chambers, struck dumb by this absurd misidentification, found himself even more absurdly following the lady's orders. To him, she was obviously an ex-madame now plying a trade behind the respectable facade of a coffee-house landlady, What was not so obvious was why he found himself knocking on that heavy door and stepping through, lamb-like, after it opened with a creak and then shut behind him with a rattle. Inside the bleak oil-lit dwelling, with waiting table, bed and thick curtain drawn, Chambers stood in confused terror. The Ripper, still with his back to him, poured wine from a freshly opened bottle into 2 grimy mugs. "Something to warm the cockles of your heart, my lady," came the faux, genteel voice across the centuries' divide. Vaguely familiar. It was so cheerfully nondescript it made little impression on Chambers' delicate ear. And delicate it was, as he almost jumped at the sight of a bedraggled muslin-draped brunette to his left, only to realise it was his own newly imposed reflection fearfully watching him from the ornate mirror hanging on the wall. As the master finally turned to face him, pushing a drink into his shaking hands, Chambers knew that divine judgment on his soul had already been passed. He watched with growing resignation a lantern show of the faces of those he'd wrongfully sent to the gallows, revolving in turn upon the shoulders of his executioner. He remembered them all and had been hoping he couldn't, that his sins would not find him out. His record was spotless in black and white, all right, but in blood his corruption and neglect were writ large, and they dripped heavily with irredeemable guilt. He looked back at his pitiful reflection, and then upwards, and tried to scream out, "If I can save this poor wretch's knowledge of her imminent destruction, wouldn't it count a worthy sacrifice, a substantial mitigation?" But the words never came. He knew them for the cowardly plea for mercy they truly were. The final face he saw at last was that of the Ripper's. It was also that of his intermediary when he was alive and younger. His hair was thicker, darker, and he was whiskered and fuller in face with the ruddiness of youth. But there was no mistaking those lifeless grey eyes behind the fashionable pince-nez. His chirpy accent lacked the cultivation of his later years, but that would come in time. The macabre whimsy had played out in full. Chambers' descent into hell had been planned from the start. It seemed the devil made use of idle hands, even after death, and the retired Ripper was his prized envoy of perdition. Chambers had had his final request granted, but his feeling now was one of dissatisfaction. How strange that such a dull physiognomy could conceal such infamous cruelty and evil. How baffling that those unremarkable eyes and that thin smile should give nothing of it away. And how odd that such banal features now brought the blood rushing to his head and red wine spilling at his feet.
I was just looking out the window towards this alleyway and to the butcher in the corner and thinking that story almost came alive there. The only dodgy bit was the former prostitute behind the bar, which and any confessions there.
To be fair, former.
Once again, a round of applause for David Williams. Next up to the stage is a very hairy fella. This is Ewan Berry with The Eyes.
The team-up had been Irene's idea. She collared me in the car park when picking Tom up one evening and asked if I would consider joining forces with her group. Tom had seemed a bit sheepish about his mum's group. When Irene went on to explain, I understood why. Talk of EMF meters, orbs and rooms suddenly going cold. Not that this type of thing was wholly unexpected from someone like Irene. She wore a large purple fleece and her backpack was emblazoned with patches from a number of peace groups, New Age festivals, trades unions and campaigns to legalise marijuana. The place is called Plaza Gorwell, she began, on a stretch of land near Llynbrennig. We've had permission from the landowner to visit, but they boarded it up to within an inch of its life. We wondered if you could lend us your skills, Jim. I mentioned it would likely give me some good footage for the Drone Sock Facebook page. Easy day's work. Irene corrected me. It would be night's work. Too much interference during the day, whatever that meant. I half joked about the spooky possibilities. She waved a dismissive hand. Don't you worry, we never get anything on the night. It all comes out when reviewing what footage and readings we've got, if at all. And Nick, our treasurer, he's got a nice big camper van, plenty of space for your kit. We reckon we can park up nearby and do it all from there. I agreed to meet them and look a bit more at logistics. A good night's work. An easy night's work. We set up 2 laptop-based footage relays in the back of Nick's Volkswagen. My feed came back from Eddie, which would be our primary drone. Tom, sat in the chair next to me, was piloting his smaller, cheaper backup unit, which we'd nicknamed Bubo, after the owl from Clash of the Titans. I put Eddie ahead of Bubo by about 40 yards, within sight of the house, so I could give the exterior the once-over. The ground floor windows were all boarded up, but there was a rose window in an east-facing gable end, where the frame had come out years ago. I told Tom to hang back just in case, thinking that in the unlikely event I lost contact with Eddie, he could help me link back up. I took Eddie in through the empty rose window, dropping into a space which looked like it had once been the attic. No old cradles or rocking horses, thank God. Just rotting timbers, cobwebs and a whole sea of dust. I found a gap in the floor where the ceiling beneath had gone. I dropped through, followed by another quick look around. Outside, an owl screeched. "Where's that?" Irene said, squinting at my monitor. Nick mused, stepping up. "Bit slim, probably a servant's bedroom." "See what else you can get, Jim," said Keith. Nick was the Society's resident sceptic. Keith was their chairman. Quick turn, again. An empty door frame at the end of the room. Nick and Keith took a muttered conflab, suggestions on which way to head. "What was that?" said Tom. I said. "I didn't see anything." "Not on yours, on mine, here." He pointed to the screen on his laptop and tapped the arched transom above the main door, where the lead frame was still in place, but no one had bothered to board it up after the glass fallout fell out. "Just here above the door, I saw what looked like eyes." "Eyes?" said Keith, rising in pitch as he did. "Yeah, eyes, like small eyes. Some light bounced off them, above the door." "Could be bats," said Nick, "or owls. Owls would roost somewhere like this." "Still, eyes," nodded Keith. "Good spot, Tom. We'll have a look at what you got later on." I carried on, steering Eddie towards the west wing. "The master bedroom would probably have been on that side," said Nick, checking his notes. "They'd have wanted to have had the evening sun, but they and the servants would have had different stairwells." As he said it, I saw the top end of a bare wooden banister. The stairwell looked slim. "You all right getting down there?" "Yeah, should be. Tom, bring Bubo up and settle him in the attic. If I knacker this up, I'll need you to rescue me." We laughed. Tom excited, revved up Bubo's rotors and lifted him towards the old rose window. I took Eddie down the stairs, trying not to fly him into the ceiling as it descended. Keith's eyes were glued to Tom's screen, while Nick and Irene kept theirs on mine. As I lowered Eddie, I could sense Irene's fingers tense up, carving creases into her sleeves. Reaching the end of the stairs, I checked Eddie's power. 13 minutes left, just time enough to do a quick look on this floor, hunt for a decent route to the ground floor, and fly back to the van for a recharge. I started another spin to get my bearings. Then, I saw them. 2 small, light-flashing eyes in a small, round face. I started. Irene shrieked. Keith swore. By the time I turned Eddie back to face where I'd seen them, they were already gone. Must have frightened it off. I could feel my fingers sweating. Each shift, each pitch, each alteration to the throttle more measured, more careful than usual. I told myself it was because I didn't like flying Eddie in such confined spaces. I knew that wasn't it. Then, a shudder. A sudden, violent pitching. We gasped. Eddie jostled, wobbling. The feed sending slanted seams back to my laptop. My hands froze at the controls. What did you hit? Asked Nick. Nothing, I replied. Must be that bloody owl. Tom, bring the U-boat down here. Maybe 2 of us will be enough to keep it away. Tom gulped, nodded, his fingers returning to his console. My hands resumed the throttle. I gave another quick turn. We all saw it at once. On a far, wide wall, just perceptible in the faux glare of the night vision, and blazoned across the exposed plaster in the dark. I can see you. I stopped. We all stretched back from my monitor. I can see you. It was Nick who broke the silence. Bloody graffiti artists have got in here before us, he said, giving a half laugh. Owners can't have boarded everything up all that well. Still, we've got it on record. Let's look for more. I nodded, a simple rivulet of cold sweat coming down my forehead. I gripped at the throttle. Back, forward, left, right. Nothing. Eddie was still. I can see you. Nothing's working, I said, hand rattling feverishly at the controls. Eddie's stuck, and I'm not getting any feedback at all. Maybe the fleet's frozen, Jim, hazarded Keith. Can that happen? Maybe the knock Eddie took has knackered whatever's sending the feedback. I shrugged. Maybe. Tom, can you bring Bubo? I'll help you down those stairs. I shifted over to Tom's desk, helping him with Bubo's controls as he came to the top of the staircase. I don't want to look down there, Jim, he said. I don't want to. Easy, mate, we're okay, said Nick, leaning down over us. Nothing to worry about except owls and graffiti. Bubo had slightly dodgier handling than Eddie, and I knew his battery wouldn't last long. As I guided the smaller drone down the stairs, my eyes occasionally flicked back to my own monitor, trying to check if there'd been any change in the feed. I can see you. Bubo made the bottom of the stairs, not needing to bother with wide sweeps. I made for the spot where I'd first seen the graffiti. The wall came into view. Nothing. No Eddie. Not even the graffiti on the wall. I flicked back to the laptop where the aborted feed was somehow still being picked up. I can see you. Jesus Christ, said Nick, fiddling with his glasses. Are you sure that's the same wall? Maybe you've got a different one, asked Keith. I pointed back and forth between the 2 screens. The same cracks ran through the plasterwork. Identical. A bizarre spot the difference. One without graffiti, one with. I can see you. Tom began to blubber. I raised my hands in a desperate shrug. Where in the hell has Eddie gone? Bang! Irene screamed. Nick wailed. Tom fell towards me, reaching for my torso as he went. We all looked up. Something had hit the roof of the van. I rose. I think we'd better check that. No, cried Tom. No, don't! His mum leaned down to him, her arms clamping around his shoulders. Nick grabbed my empty chair and held it defensively like a lion tamer. Keith, he murmured, get behind me. Just as Keith formed up, Nick flung open the double doors at the back of the Volkswagen. I raised my hands into a defensive pose, preparing myself for something. Nothing. Nothing came. Nick stepped out, holding the chair in front of him. Keith followed, his keyring torch lighting the bare screen of the lay-by. I heard Nick call something before bending to the ground, just out of sight past the doors. When he rose holding Eddie. The rotocopters were askew, the camera barely in place. I rushed forward and took it from him, cradling it in my arms. My eyes flicked back to the laptop again. I can see you. Let's leave, said Irene. Let's leave. Tom nodded and got up, still holding on to his mother. Nick climbed back in the van, slamming the door shut behind him. What about your drone, Tom? Asked Keith. Tom shook his head. It didn't cost much. Let's just leave it, please. Nick nodded, making for the driver's seat as I fiddled with Eddie, giving feeble tests as to where would need repairing. Nick fired up the van, Keith strapping himself in beside him. We peeled off from the lay-by. Irene giving blind shushes to Tom, who was still shaking. I went to switch off the laptops. As I did, I spotted that Tom's feed had changed. There, in the same spot as on mine, as though it had always been there, where there had been nothing at all before, something. The two screens now mirrored. I can see you. I can see you. Thank you very much.
I'm going to call a little break now if anybody wants to refill their cup. So 5 or 10 minutes break, and then we will continue with the first story from tonight's headline act, Marianne Cope. So about 5 or 10 minutes, and we'll gather back round. So please feel free to go out in the street, frighten people, eat people, cut people, pieces, whatever you wish to do, and we'll be back shortly.
I think to myself as I stamp my feet and try to keep warm. Don't worry, Gemma, we won't leave you, they both giggled, having talked me into going to a damn party that I didn't want to go to. I should have listened to my gut and gone home at a reasonable hour from a place I knew in a safe mode of transport. Now look at me, alone in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere, with no phone signal. What's worse is I can't remember anything. All I know is that I've got to get back, and the only way I can do that is by a method I promised my dad I would never do. Hitchhike. Not that even hitchhiking is looking fruitful, as I've been wandering along this road for ages and no one has passed. I glanced at my watch. 5 a.m. Have I missed my chance of a lift? As I sit down to rest my aching feet, bloody heels, and contemplate my chances, I hear the sound of an engine approaching. My heart leaps and my adrenaline sends a surge of hope through me. Can it be true? I look up from my blissful massage and see a glint of light on the horizon. This could be the dawn, I tell myself, until my sensible brain kicks in and reminds me of the temperature and time of the year. As the light crests the hill, it morphs into headlight beams and I reluctantly slip my feet back into my killer heels. Don't worry, the irony isn't lost on me or my feet. I stand up wincing and pull the hem of my now too short skirt a little lower and try to make my now too small top cover as much of me as possible. I know a coat would have been sensible, but come on. Who wears a coat when going out for a night out on the town? As I tiptoe forward, trying to avoid the stones vying to cripple me further, I hope the car will see me and, more importantly, will stop. Hoping it doesn't contain a serial killer just doesn't enter my thought process. You have to remember, all sense of reason has left me at this point. I get as close to the side of the road as I dare. It is dark, and I do have some survival instincts, and stick my arm out, thumb raised as I've seen them do in the movies 1,000 times, and pray to God, to a God I don't believe in. I sense, more than anything, the slowing of the car, and I glance heavenwards and whisper my thanks as it glides to a halt beside me and a window stutters down. Pungent smoke rolls towards me and I cough as I waft it out of the way, before bending down and peering inside, trying to close my ears to the racket. "Hi!" I yell, and the driver smiles at me. At least I presume he's smiling. It's hard to tell through his beard, which seems to house the remnants of his last meal. His eyes are smiling, at least. Howdy, little lady. What are you doing all the way out here on your lonesome? He finishes his question by licking his lips, and I shudder, swallowing down my revulsion to my lifeline. Don't ask, I say. Don't suppose you could give me a ride? I can take you wherever you want to go, little lady. Now hop in. For the second time that night, I pray to a non-existent God and drag the car door open. The footwell is full of discarded offerings, and I step in, knowing full well this is the last time these heels will be on my feet. My fragrant saviour wastes no time in setting off, and even less time in starting his interrogation, or should I say his assumed scenarios. So, you haven't answered my question, he says, and I can see him out the corner of my eye as he glances at my legs. Which question? I say as I recoil as much as I can into the confines of my still too short skirts. What are you doing wandering out here on your own? Just bad luck, I guess, I say, not wanting to share. Oh, don't tell me a pretty little thing like you hasn't got a strong, protective man to look after her, he says, reaching his hand out and patting my knee. I bat his hand away and press against the door, not answering, and cursing another bad choice in a night full of bad choices. You're a secretive one, aren't you? Don't tell me your friends abandoned you after promising not to. I snort involuntarily, giving him the win he wants. Bingo, he says, and punches the air. So where'd they go then? Where were you, as there's no places along here for miles? I lapse into silence again, but not because I don't want to answer, which I don't, by the way, but because I honestly can't remember. I stare out the window and screw my face up as I try and focus my mind. I remember arriving at this house in the middle of nowhere for a party. As predicted, there was no party, and I remember having a fight with Ash and Rachel, insisting we get a cab and leave immediately, but they refused. They wanted to party with the 4 guys we'd come with. I didn't. I remember sitting on the sofa, arms folded across my chest, waiting for them to finish partying. I remember one of the guys, the shy, quiet one, bringing me a cup of tea and telling me he felt the same as me about it all. I remember relaxing a little and drinking the tea. I don't remember anything after tea. Do you want to at least tell me where you live? What? I say, my voice hoarse. Strange. Your address? 412 Longacre. I can't finish as coughs rack my body and I bring my hands up to massage my throat. Christ, my neck hurts all of a sudden. Are you okay, little lady? My unwashed companion says, and I nod. Turn left, I croak. But this isn't turn left, I say again, every word in effort as the tightness in my throat increases. Are you sure you're... What the hell? Were your legs like that when you got in, he says, staring openly at my bare limbs and then righting us at the last minute as the car begins to swerve. Turn right, I say automatically, as I stare down at my bruised and grazed legs, the stinging in the dirty open wounds getting stronger. Right again, I say, lifting my arms to see the slashes, the dirt, the blood, the bruising. But this isn't the way. Stop the car! I cough, my hands grappling at my throat. I can't breathe, I need air. I fight with the door handle and tumble out, landing hard. I concentrate on trying to get air into my lungs, but I can't. It's too hard, my throat's too sore. I try and stand, but only collapse and roll onto my back, tears streaming from my eyes as I try and pull my throat open to let some air in. I stare heavenwards, my vision starting to cloud. Crazy chick, Abe mutters as he stops the car. What the hell did you do that for? I hadn't even stopped, he shouts, hauling himself out of the Capri. No answer, there's no surprise. He mutters and waddles round to the passenger side. Shit. Abe stops in his tracks, staring down at the young woman at his feet. A young woman whose arms and legs are adorned with darkened welts and crusted openings. A young woman swathed in mud and soaking leaves, whose too short skirt rests around her waist as deep, bloodied slashes in her thighs yield the fight she put up, whose too small top lies shredded, revealing milky breasts patterned by a mouth not intent on pleasure. A young woman staring up into the night, her eyes glassy and forever bearing his mark, her lips blue and torn, her neck long and purple. A young woman whose broken and bloody fingernails hold the remnants of her fate as she reaches towards him, begging him. A young woman he swore had been talking to him moments before, yet had clearly been here for hours. A young woman who wanted a lift home.
Well, guys, if anybody's driving home tonight, don't pick up any advice. I'd also suggest, guys, if you plan to walk, don't wear high heels. It doesn't sound good. Ladies, well, I don't think you need any protection, do you, with the sound of that? There we are. Thank you once again to Marie and Co. Next up then, another fabulous lady writer reader. Please, Ria, would you like to join me on the stage? A hand for Ria, please.
Thought I'd save the planet by not printing it.
Yes.
Hello, who are you? I did not recognise my reflection in the mirror. I was alien, having an out-of-body experience. Those eyes, that hair, it wasn't me. Or rather it was me, but 10 years from now. My eyes scanned around the room. Empty. Had I gone mad? Was it some sort of trip? A trip on a drug I didn't remember taking? My mouth was dry and my eyes red. The end of the war had sharpened my senses, not wiped them out with the rest, but elevated them. Above all was the sense of feeling. I wasn't alone. I was never alone. I felt things, all things in heaven and in the earth and in hell. How then did I not recognise myself? Knock, knock. Who's there? Who? What? Well, what was that? What the devil was that now? As I strode over to the door, a rumble came from below. It was inside me. I looked down at the small bulge and cupped it. What do you want, eh? You hungry? You've not been fed, you hungry hippo. Go back to bed. I shall wake you when it's time. I lifted the heavy iron latch and it clicked. As I opened the door, a cold air staggered its way in. Get out! Go away! You're not welcome here. I don't like you and you weren't invited. I think it's very rude to turn up at my door uninvited. Very gradually I made my mind up to close the door and return to my room, thus ridding myself of them. Was I alone or had they stayed? Every night about 11:53 I turned the latch at my door and opened it, ever so gently. Upon the 15th time of opening the door I was more than unusually happy. I was having a little get-together and they'd arrived earlier than I'd anticipated. My eyes widened. Thank goodness, I think the heavens must have sent you. I'm so glad you're here. There is a surprise cooking in the oven, but I just can't reach it. Come on, squeeze in and get it for me. I made small talk to fill the silence as we ate. The night waned and I worked hastily to fill the silence. Fancy seeing you here. How are you? Lovely weather we're having. I've been a busy little bee the last time I saw you. Oh, heavens, Sir Murgatroyd, what are you taking the mick now? My mind fails me. It's late. You better go. Today I was going on an adventure. I'd always dreamt of going to Prague, but that little girl had been watching me for a while now. Her black eyes and large head invaded my consciousness. Was it her who had been knocking on my door these past 19 nights? She'd better have a reason for all that hullabaloo. I think I'll find Prague another day, perhaps. I turned round and stopped short. She started to speak, but I couldn't fathom what she was saying. I began to panic as she continued to stare. Small murmurs left her lips. I felt myself getting pale and wished her gone. My head pounded and I likened to a ringing in my left ear, but she still remained. I hoped that by opening and closing my eyes she would disappear. Alas, I found no peace. I wanted to be alone. You, Mrs. Gardner, have outstayed your welcome. Did Mother not tell you it was rude? I lay on the cold, hard floorboards, outstretched, my long, bony fingers reaching out towards the edges of the room. The ringing had stopped and I found a noise that was not within my ears but in that very room. A pitter-patter of little tiny feet. Hello there, Audrey. I've been thinking about you. What have you brought me today, little one? Really? I sloped my head to one side so as to catch a glimpse of Audrey moving, each leg in sync with one another like small mechanisms. Your toe beans are so much fun. I just want to touch you. Squish. Crack. Oh, you've gone flat, little one. Oh, are you playing? I like it when the red liquid runs out. Look, there's so much liquid, red liquid. Gosh, you've made a mess. You better clean that up. Hop to it. Spit spot, attention. Pitter-patter, no more feet. I must have fallen asleep as I was startled by a loud banging on the door. That bloody door again. I gasped for breath as I arose and argued towards the door with elaborate gesticulations. Why aren't they gone? Stop knocking on the door. Go away. I took the door with heavy strides as if it excited with rage with whoever dared to knock on my door. How I dreamt of a new visitor. After the war I'd been so alone. I lifted the latch and swung the door open. Have you come to see me? It seems my first guest has arrived. Would you like some hors d'oeuvres? They're simply divine. I cannot eat another thing. My tummy pit feels broken. Out of service. I talked more frequently and with a heightened voice. A sharp noise penetrated my eardrum. Leave, please. It's time for you to go. You're a stupid man. A stupid, stupid man. I shan't waste my time with you any longer. Leave before I get cross. Half unconscious, I wandered through the desolate wasteland, passing burnt-out trees and the memory of fallen soldiers. There she was again, that girl. The girl with no name, no voice, just eyes. I blacked out. I awoke in the centre of a room, a rope hanging above me. My bed situated in the corner had sunken in. Someone had been sitting there. It wasn't me. I could hear something. Audrey, is that you? No, Mrs. Gardner, it's you. Simon Steeple, it's past your bedtime. Get to sleep at once. It's that pesky hitchhiker. Bert, his name was. No, you can't get a lift. There's no room. I sat on my bed and began scribing a letter. To my love, I'm sad that you are gone. How are the trenches? All is okay here. A little tear rolled down my face. There was a sentence that invaded my brain and stayed there. I wrote it, although I had thought about it before. It's as though it was the first. I am sick. I feel my final hours are upon us. My mind has wandered and I'm afraid it is lost. Do you think I am mad? Send help, quickly. I looked out the window as I sealed my letter. A blank canvas. How I yearn for the older days. I feel as though my world is empty. My very senses have rejected their own instincts. Tomorrow shall I sleep and never wake? You'd like that, wouldn't you? Yes, of course you would. Once I tried to escape from this place, but the further I travelled away, the louder the screams became, deafening, echoes penetrating my ears. I feared that if I left, they would too. Oh, what a sorry sight. I felt pain as I tried to leave them. Their twiggy fingers lapsed onto me from different directions, pulling me from pillar to post. 3 men entered. They did not introduce themselves, but I observed their white coats. Have you come to save me? It's about time. I think you had better get your manager, for I have a complaint to make. I blacked out again. I came around to the flicker of the projector light. The whirring noise from the fan had jolted me awake. My eyes bulged as black and white headlines flashed in front of my eyes, causing me to squint momentarily. Multiple dead, bodies found in the walls, serial killer sent to asylum. Images repeated. Flashes of the girl with no name, Bert and Audrey and the ones I did not recognise. All victims of the war, I thought. Poor soldiers who had died in battle. Just what do you think you're doing? Where have you taken me? I looked down at my legs, covered by a thin blue robe. My hands were bound and bloody. I suspect foul play. I protested, louder, louder, louder. Let me go. I shrieked in agony. Let me go! I blinked through misty eyes. The air was so cold I could see my own breath. I stood hastily and stared at the outline of my body on the wooden floor. Come on down, you regular bobbly dazzler. You are divine. What a picture you are. So many of them turned up to see me. I woke up again to the knocking at the door. You're here for me, aren't you? Yes, I suppose that day has come. The rope felt cold against my flesh. Who was I thought, as I tightened the knot. Where was I? I pondered as I kicked the stool from beneath my feet. As I stood up, they circled me. I could see their faces. Let me pass now. I've been here for too long. They all laughed in sync. I was flying. For the first time, I felt alive.
That was a specially commended entry from the story writing competition, and a very creepy little story at that. I'm going to have another little quick comfort break now, 5 or 10 minutes, and we'll bring on the next performances. So do grab some more coffee, tea, craft beer, spend your money at the bar, and enjoy. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's all stare at the people eating, just make them feel really guilty.
Make you feel jealous?
Absolutely, we are jealous, but don't worry, please enjoy. I'd like to welcome Sam Radcliffe to the stage now for his story. This is the third place story, this is Darlington Woods.
Hello. Hi.
Music to the musical.
First time here. First time I wrote a short story. First time I used first person, so lots of firsts. There we go. Yeah! Enthusiasm. Sometimes I think I understand. When I'm walking through the trees, when I hear the wind rush through the leaves, when I feel the rough grit of stone on my fingers, I can smell the damp loam of this place. Sometimes I sit here and simply live. Too often I just forget to be. She's over there now, across the way, up the hill, near the old stone wall. Harriet. She's talking to someone over the wall. I can't make out what she's saying, but I can tell from the highs and lows of her voice that she is happy. It makes me smile. At least, on the inside. The leaves in the trees above me shift in the breeze. My eyes get caught in the glare of the light. I almost move. Instead, I just sit here, caught in it, feeling the warmth. A few moments pass. I listen. The trees creak and groan. The plants, the tall grasses, the wild brambles, and thistles rasp quietly. I can hear the sound of a can being opened and offered, followed by a pause, and a laugh. The old bench I'm sitting on is cold. Last night's rain soaks into my skin. It's not immediately a pleasant feeling, but then, in a strange way, it is. For most of my life, I've avoided these things. I've wrapped myself up in warm clothing. I've looked out of my window at bad weather and decided to stay in. But that's just it. It's not bad weather, it's weather. For a long time, I avoided the outside, in case I caught a cold or an illness, in case I got sunburnt, or in case I would sweat. I wrapped myself up in warm blankets, in mugs of tea, and in the immersion of fiction. Cocooned myself. Now I think how sharply I've desensitized myself. How much time I spent worrying about the world, about money, about friends, about all the endless lists of tasks and deadlines I gave myself. How am I going to make an impact? Will I be forgotten? How bad will the results be if, well, anything be? It seemed like every day I was paralysed by what could be, or held down by what had been. The truth is, the only way to escape the endless spiral of thoughts was to live in the moment. To do that, all you had to do was clear your mind, focus your senses. I can't imagine a world without them. To have had them and then lost them, it would be worse than living. I wouldn't trade them for anything, and I'd do anything to keep them. I found that out a few years ago, right here in these woods. After the first time, after I met Harriet. The sunlight moves, the breeze turns. A few moments ago, Harriet's conversation stopped, and now I sense her beside me. "How's your friend?" I ask, my eyes still closed. "Good. He's on his way home from school." I blink my eyes open. The seasons had only just changed, but it was bitingly cold. I shiver at the sudden change in the breeze. I was glad I could warm my hands around my thermos. She doesn't flinch. And the bully problem? He says they've stopped. How many were there again? 5. I've sorted it. If there are any more, I said you should bring them to me, she said. You sure they won't come back? Yeah, I'm sure. Good. I nod slightly and smile at that. It's good that she is channeling herself towards helping the right people. Sounds like you had a good time with your friend up there. Mm-hmm. She sits down beside me. He's going to come back tomorrow with his battery pack of speakers so we can listen to music and watch YouTube. We sit together. The tree branches above us creak in the wind. Her feet scuff the dirt. I can tell by the way she sits she's trying to be casual, but still holding herself with purpose. She wants something. In the distance, some twigs snap and crack. He's going to bring some snacks too, she says, finally looking at me. There it is. I don't get to normally... Well, you know what we said, I say. Maybe this time we wouldn't argue. Yeah, I know. Every time we do this, I have to be careful. Harriet stares off into the distance. Every time she made a friend, they always found her to be odd. Maybe not the first time, or the second, but eventually they would realise her limitations. People start asking uncomfortable questions about her. Unless we prepare her. The trees in the distance creak again. Do you think I'll have enough? I don't know what to say. I don't want to get her hopes up. The last ones didn't quite do it. I'll have to check, see if they're still good, but we both know it might not work. We can at least try, yeah? Okay. Where did you hide them? Harriet leans forwards a bit and points around me, down the path. I reach down and pick up my thermos. I click the cap back on, the hot steam collecting in my palm. I almost warn her as I pass it over. Old habits die hard. My clothing is awfully drawn around me from sitting so too long. With a stretch, I adjust my jumper and the rain-made humid trousers. I ache a little, but that isn't anything new. Right, let's go. Wait, what? You'll need the shovel. We begin our walk. The woods around us aren't dense, but enough to feel secluded. The main allure of them is that they crawl around the village for several miles. One could wander for days among the trees, watching and listening, time blending into itself. The occasional drop of rain trickles down, landing on the fabric of my shoulder. I walk in the lead, shovel in hand. It's heavy, much heavier than the last time. It gets heavier every time. The shovel head clinks off the ground. I adjust my grip. As we walk, I hear the gurgling of hunger. She is hungry. How many did you need last time? 2. Birds sing, hidden, chirping to each other in the bushes. I come to a stop and turn. As Harriet passes by, they stop. There is a moment of chaotic fluttering and flapping as they flee to the canopy above. She looks up, watching them disappear. As she watches, something disappears from her expression. There is a disconnectedness about her. She looks at me, and that's all it takes. I understand. Which way then? Down there. She points to the edge of the path. It disappears down steeply. Autumn leaves are caught by the brush and the bases of the trees. They had to be down there, didn't they? I can't be too critical though. I did say she needed to hide them well. Last time was too risky. I lean forward slightly, feeling the vertigo. I begin to clamber down the muddy slope. Thorns graze my skin slightly, and the prickle of a nettle scatters its way up my leg. I slip near the bottom, grazing my knee. I wince slightly, throbbing. It wasn't long ago I go to great lengths to avoid pain. Right now, it was somewhat refreshing. It reminded me that I was actually doing something, actually affecting change. I push on, grasping at filthy handholds, using the shovel I brought as support. Eventually, I find myself in a rough, cold clay hollow. Above me, the brambles that drew blood form a sort of cover, diffusing the sun's rays. The steep slopes look as though a great hand had reached down at some point in the past and clawed out the soil. Tendril-like roots around me burst from the ground, bundle and bunch, weaving in and out of each other in great Celtic knots. They tangle up large, pod-like shapes and trail off again into the network of the forest. I stab my shovel into the earth and lean on it. I start counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. As I watch the wreathed pods, they pulse, twitch, writhe like nerves that are binding pupae, roots moving of their own accord. I curse under my breath. I think I see an eye in there, darting about. Last time she'd only needed to. I don't look too long, I already know what I have to do. It started. It has to be done. I take up my shovel and start digging, burying, covering them in loose soil, shovel by shovel. It took a long time to clamber out. I'm covered head to toe in dirt and scripts. My breathing is heavy. Harriet and I sit on the edge of the hollow, legs dangling down. The crackling of roots and vines below is faint. The trunks of the trees surrounding us crack and boom. Branches snap and sway. As I look to Harriet, she looks distant and is clutching her stomach. I sympathise. The cold caress of wind moves her hair, and she shivers, and a thin-lipped smile works its way across her face. Autumn is cold, she says, turning her face into the breeze. Down below, in the dark of the hollow, there is a wet popping sound, like a water balloon full of sludge bursting. I think I understand. Her feelings might last a couple of days, if she was lucky. 5 seems to be enough, I say, watching the leaves above us undulate. When your friend comes tomorrow for those snacks, make sure you get to try a bit of everything. My skin is raw and I ache, and the air is cold on my skin. It's how I know I exist. I wouldn't trade anything for what I feel in the moment, for the ability to be living in the moment. The thought of those poor bullies starts to creep into the back of my mind, but I push them into the cracks. Instead, I focus on the moment and everything I can feel. There's another sickening, crackling splash below. She would trade anyone to feel the same. And sometimes, I think I understand.
That sort of squelching pop has been in my mind for the last few weeks. Okay, thank you very much, Sam Radcliffe. Once again, a hand of applause, please.
Okay, so I've written this one specifically for Halloween, so hopefully it's a little bit creepy. Oh shit.
Is that red gold?
Yeah, oh shit, yeah. Okay. So this is where angels fear to tread. I can't really believe I'm here in this situation and telling you all about it, no less. I mean, it's not like me to get into scrapes like this, although my parents would disagree. Too headstrong is their favourite way to describe me, and for once I think they're right. It was my idea, but I didn't do this. That was someone else. It was Halloween, and what else were we supposed to do on Halloween? Go trick-or-treating? No way. Not anymore. That's for kids. We were bigger than that. Time for the hard stuff, I'd said and grinned, knowing full well the reaction I'd get. You see, my friends aren't into scary movies, monsters, or anything dark and creepy for that matter. Part of the reason I always dragged them out, to be honest. The only reason they'd gone trick-or-treating as kids was because everyone else had. They'd have rather stayed home and played war games on their computers. I'm the opposite, always have been. I can't remember a time I didn't want to investigate the creepy sound, the dark corner, or read about grisly murders and strange disappearances. The other kids at school call me freak, but that's their issue, not mine. Anyway, back to my story. Now, you're probably thinking I'd take my friends to the scary old mansion that nobody dared go near, the house where several families have been murdered in similar circumstances, their massacres hundreds of years apart, but you'd be wrong. That's too cliched for Halloween. Although you'll probably argue the place I wanted to take them to was pretty similar. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But I've done the Massacre Mansion so many times and wanted a change. Though my change was yet another crumbling building with dark secrets to share, only added to its appeal, as did the whole danger, keep out, condemn building signs. I mean, come on. Don't the authorities know signs like that to teenagers are like the flame to the proverbial moth? We're just drawn to them, or I am at least. Jimmy and Matt, not so much. The truth was, I'd scared them so much last year that they refused to come with me this year. Yes, I was disappointed, but as I stood before the wire fence, staring at the beautiful crumbling facade that rose before me, the familiar shiver of anticipation ran through me, and I squeezed the bolt cutters that I brought with me as I shuddered. This, I knew, would be awesome. Being somewhat of an expert at getting into places I wasn't supposed to, I made short work of the fence and padlock on the front door and slipped inside, anxious to be out of sight of prying eyes, but also to be inside a place I would never normally get to see. I hoped. Over the years, asylums were used for many purposes, from healing the sick to housing unwed mothers, but it was their imprisonment of those deemed mentally ill that led to their dark and sinister reputation, as the treatment of the inmates within the walls was reportedly horrific. It was these patients that I was hoping to meet as I made my rounds. I wanted to hear their stories, to find out the truth, and to see if it really was as bad as everyone believed. As I stood with my back to the door, I closed my eyes to allow my other senses to attune to the vibrations of this once majestic building. My hearing went through the tinnitus ringing that silence brings, until it came out the other side, tuned now to the steady drip of leaking pipes, the clatter of avian visitors, the creaks and groans of a rotting building settling after the meagre warmth of the day. I inhaled deeply, allowing the stagnant air to tickle my nostrils, bringing with it the dank, mildewed smell of decaying bricks and rusting pipes, the musty aroma of moth-eaten mattresses and curtains, the acrid stench of urine and faeces, animal or human, uncertain, and of course, the universal fragrance of all old buildings, the underlying fetid scent of death. Most people miss this, but the scent is unmistakable. It makes sense if you think about it. This building, more than most, had seen an inordinate amount of death in its lifetime. My hearing and smell acclimatised to my surroundings, it was time to open my eyes. Now, I spent most of my time in the dark, or with very muted light, much to my parents' frustration and bewilderment. I've seen them, hovering in the bedroom doorway, hanging their heads in shame. I don't care. I prefer it. I love the night and its darkness. The best way to watch scary movies is in the dark, and the best way to get an immersive experience of a derelict building is also in the dark. Of course, there is the danger element, the risk of injury, but you'd be surprised how much you can see in the dark when you allow yourself to look. That night was a clear, crisp night, and whilst the moon wasn't full, it was luminous enough to create the alternating pockets of darkness and semi-darkness as it cut through the jagged window panes and stabbed the exposed ribs of the roof. I pushed away from the door and made my way down the corridor, its priceless parquet floor strewn with years of detritus, not all asylum-related. I knew where I was going. I'd studied the floor plans until I knew them by heart, but it didn't stop me getting distracted en route to my final destination. It's hard not to get distracted, to be honest. So many things, so new yet so familiar. The rotted oak staircase, gleaming and majestic as it spirals to the top of the building, carrying patients to their fates and staff to their duties. I am tempted to climb the staircase, to wind my way up to the very top, to the attic corridor hidden high in the rafters, a corridor lined with doors, all firmly closed and locked, doors behind which little boys are subdued when they become too much for the headmaster. I know he'll be waiting if I go up. He always is, ever since that first day when I called out, and a few minutes later felt the tentative fingers touch the palm of my hand, before slipping his hand fully into mine and offering me his ball. I can hear it now, bouncing along, his tiny footsteps chasing after it as there's no one to return it to him. Sad, I turn away and continue my journey. I try to keep my gaze fixed ahead, but the gaping hole to my right is calling to me, and I pause again. I look down at the stained wooden floor, knowing I can't just walk past, but aware of what will happen if I don't. I take that step, as one step is all I need, and the weight crashes down. I stagger back against the doorframe, my hands pushing against the force bearing down on my chest. I cough as my airway struggles to allow access to the stagnant air. I force myself to open my eyes, and I see them. I also hear them now, the animalistic screams and howls of the suppressed, as orderlies hold them down while nurses strap them in before the doctor produces the magic needle. I turn away. I have to. I can't help them. Believe me, I've tried. But they look through me, searching for a different reality. Stepping backwards out into the cracked, brightly painted corridor, the weight dissipates and the screaming subsides. No more distractions now, I think, as I turn away from the lavatory door, a palm slamming against the glass, a low moan emanating from within. I've somewhere to be. I can see it ahead of me, the corridor to my fate, the place I've thought about so much over the last few weeks. I feel a ripple run through my body. Excitement, anticipation, both. The light is flickering, the darkness all-encompassing as I stand and stare towards the room at the end, the reason I am here, the place where they are queuing up to tell me their stories. The sound of the saw, so familiar now as I stand transfixed, the staccato light revealing the before and the after, the then and the now, the vision and the reality. There are no screams in this room, it's too late for that. This is where the scent becomes a stench. This is where warmth disappears and cold sets in. This is where it is darkest, where people await their turn, mute and immobile. As I make my way towards this sanctuary, this port in the proverbial storm of this place, I hear it. It's weak, but reverberates through my head. I turn to see a stained and mildewed door, its metal handle bright and rusted, a self-locking one to keep the patients out until the time is right, its contents preserved until it is time for their transfer. The scratching sound, for that's what it is, continues intermittently, and I reach out, my translucent hand wrapping around the warm steel. That's when it comes back to me. I have been here before, in this place, doing exactly what I'm doing now. The sense of déjà vu is overwhelming, as is the niggling thought I'm supposed to have done something else, something before coming back here. I release the handle, and the sound of the saw scraping against bone fills my ears, pushing my thoughts away. I reach out again, and the silence surrounds me once more, the urge to know what is behind the door overwhelming. Pulling down on the handle, I step back, the door opening easily, sighing as it does so, as though relieved that I've made my decision. As the dust settles and I can see inside at last, the niggling thought becomes clear, and I remember what I was supposed to do. Jimmy and Matt should have come back, but they didn't. I waited, secure in the knowledge that they would. Initially, when I'd heard the footsteps retreating up the corridor after the door slammed shut behind me, I'd smiled, presuming this to be payback for scaring the crap out of them last year. I'd smiled to myself, sat down on the floor of the meat locker, tempted to lie on one of the racks to know what it felt like, to imagine more bodies stacked above me and below me, but I didn't. I simply sat and waited. They thought they could scare me by locking me in here. They were sadly mistaken. The thing was, they didn't come back. I tried to tell myself they were testing me, but an alarm somewhere deep in my mind was telling me this scenario was impossible. That's when the shakes set in, when the clamminess pervaded my skin as I shivered, when my heart started to beat faster and my mouth went dry. I banged on the door and shouted until my voice grew hoarse and my fists bled. That's when I had an idea. It didn't take me long to snap off a usable length of the decaying body tray. But then what? I knew trying to crowbar my way out was impossible, as the metal bars were too weak, and the door still held the vacuum seals that all fridges have. But if I could just find those hinges, maybe I could. As I scratched away at where I thought the hinges were, length of metal after length of metal, the adrenaline the only thing keeping me going, I willed my location into the minds of my friends and parents. But the trouble was, None of them believed. And more to the point, none of them knew where I was. No one did. I stand and stare as the words "go for help" run like ticker tape through my mind. There's only one way I could get help, I think, as I watch with fascination the eruptions beneath the greying skin. Some people believe that when one life ends, another begins. That for every birth, there must be a death. Is that what I'm seeing now? Life from death? I know I went to get help, many times. How else did I get to know this place so well? How else did I get to meet Adam and play ball with him? The trouble is, for me to get help, people would need to believe. And even if they do though, it's too late. Too late for this life, but maybe not for the next. Because I do paranormal nights, as Alan knows, to Newsham Park Asylum 2 years ago, and yes, I did have a little boy touch my hand and hold my hand and throw a ball, so that's what it's all based on.
It's really hard to clap with gloves on, so you're going to have to do the volume for me, please. I'd like to welcome to the stage Lara Edwards.
It's a bit nerve-wracking being the poet, I'm not going to lie. Basically, this is a new thing to me. I love Halloween, I love anything spooky and supernatural. And every now and again I find pieces and I go, this is a thing that I wrote. So I hope you enjoy this. It's called Vermilion. I am clinging onto the right side of the bed, curling up to find myself sleeping it all away, pacing the same old cornflower blue walls again and again. The flowers have dried out and are dying from the silence and lack of direct sunlight. I should probably replace them. I won't though. Once a place of sanctuary until this moment has made me unravel at my very seams. The windowsill is gathering dust, neglect coated, as the memories smile once more unforgiving, yet the happiness flickered like the candles that bleed their wax. They are leaving a stain everywhere, on the box that was meant to be silver, crammed with trinkets and mementos, with a hint of I can smell expensive yet stale perfume. Here is a sense of irony. I climb up on my black leather seat, my back is pressed up against the CDs overflowing onto the beige carpet. I breathe in the scent of early morning frosted jewel leaves on the trees burnt outside my window, but I cannot reach. I try to scream, but no sound is heard. I am no painter, but I can try and line every detail of this picture with paint that does not stick, but something has tarnished me. My life is a piece of A4 paper. All I'm trying to do is illuminate the truth through these broken collages. So now I sit in my room and try and close my eyes. I try so hard that the droplets decorate the newspapers and the articles. I present tears that deflect suspicion from what eats away at my soul. The sunlight has hit me right between my baby blues today. I draw hearts on the glass and the wind blows them away. Nighttime already has drawn the day as you know it to a close, but I stand on my tiptoes and take a quick gasp of air and slowly step across the sand. I throw pebbles across rivers and watch them sink down, submerged by the deep, dark depths. Whoever knew that humanity could feel this way? Now I sit with the water that's twirling anti-clockwise as if it's trying to fight its inevitable fate, but it is no use. It is going down the drain. A lesson learned from irony's sake. Now I stand on the edge of the marble bathtub, flecked and pebble-dashed with vermilion. I wonder what sound can be heard as I drag the lifeless carcass, but the water drowns it out. There is a mural painted 6 feet high in height, staring down at me on cracked two-tone tiles that no amount of scrubbing can remove the trace. I almost told you what it feels like, but you can't hear. Our first kiss was our last kiss goodbye. Can you see the world with so much blood on your hands? It is splattered all over the tile and it feels more like a murder scene now. The temperature in here makes me gaze into your dead eyes but still no sound. Your body, life, limpless. And no one now can cry. You can be thankful that the blood is yours, not mine. Thank you very much. I've never performed that before. That was quite excellent, wasn't it? Woo, okay. Another one? Yeah. Okay. When it loads. Yeah, so this next piece, I actually wrote it for creative writing, and I actually decided I was going to perform this about 5:30 this afternoon when I read it. And yeah, I'm thinking I'm going to call it a haunting / ghosts. So here it goes. I do not want to tell anyone what I see. This is a secret that I keep to myself. A trick of the light, perhaps, but when the evening comes, I see my father in the orange and yellow light that casts silhouettes. I cannot rely on my eyes here in the darkness of the country sound, but the sounds are amplified in my ears. The rush of blood and my heart that thuds out its beats. I am terrified, with the hair on my arm raising up in shackles. The world is different at night time. What seems familiar in the day transforms. Contrary to belief, it is not deathly silent, though some sounds are so clear that they ring in my ears like church bells. In the spring, a hullabaloo of sounds, robins, frogs, and maybe a deer or two. This is winter, and the cold is trying to creep through every layer, and birds of prey soar in the skies above. But it is winter now. I hear the twitteroo of a tawny owl. It is familiar to me, and the moonlight sky dotted with white stars above. Slithers of white light illuminate the hedgerows. I am uncomfortable. Rustled leaves of miniature creatures trying to hide from a predator skulking in the darkness. There is only me here in this clandestine night. Well, I should be alone, but I'm not alone. I'm joined by an unwanted, sullen visitor. He broods, yet he does not seem able to speak. His mouth is full of the dirt that he was buried underneath. The world is not as silent as the grave that he is buried in. It is alive. In the golden light between the dust of Eve, he stands and stares as if accusing me in the house where we live together. I see him on staircases out of my corner-eye vision. He may be buried, but he haunts me like a ghost. Sometimes I attempt to go and get away and be in the forest to be alone, but between the tree branches that sway and seem so harmless in the day, the forest is where the ghost dwells. The nights are where I find it difficult to sleep. I do not want to sleep. In my dreams, my father lumbers after me, chasing through the forest, clawing at me with arms outstretched to catch me, drag me down into the dirt instead of him, because when I sleep, I wake up screaming. I wake up in cold sweats. I tell myself the ghosts are not real, but I know that that is a lie. I am being followed by the dead. It seems that whether I am awake or asleep, he will still not leave me alone, even though I was ready to die instead, ready to escape the misfortune of a brutal death. My father died years ago now, but it still feels fresh to me like the dirt I was covered in and the glove that I ever kept hold of. That is the thing about my father. He does not want to stay dead and buried. Thank you. A round of applause for Andy for providing us with our tea and drinks and coffee and stuff. To the fabulous Marianne Cook for that the spine-tingling stories that she's been reading us, which have been splendid. To all the short story performers, you and Sam, and everybody, big round of applause for them. And last but not certainly least, the fantastic J. Allen Longshadow. Enjoy the rest of your
Thank you, Laura. How much fun, Laura, did you have putting that costume together tonight?
So much fun.
Oh, you going to get that blood off you?
Possibly.
It's fantastic. Thank you, Laura, ever so much. Well, I guess it's time for me to contribute to tonight's storytelling event then. So I'm going to read a story. The story is called Remember Death. Funnily enough, it's about a priest that made me laugh to see somebody turn up in a dog collar tonight. This is Remember Death. But for the lack of a dog collar, you might easily have mistaken Lucian for a priest. He had, as a younger man, been a man of the cloth, and as they said, once a priest, always a priest. To see him now, dressed entirely in black, you could be forgiven for thinking he still was. It was ironic, really, given the incident that had caused him to lose his faith for so long. He'd been summoned to a hospital to administer the last rites late one night as he returned from a personal engagement, and had not had time to return to the presbytery to don his cassock. Luckily, he always kept his sick visitation kit in his car, so he had made the journey directly to the patient. He'd spent much of his ministry, and indeed his life, dealing with death. It was death, ultimately, that had drawn him to his vocation. He felt at home with death, and people seemed to find his presence reassuring in times of grief. That wasn't to say it was an easy thing for him. Nobody should have to bear a coffin the size of a shoebox. No parent should have to play God when their adult child has reached the end of his journey. No child should lose their best and only friend at the tender age of 8. It was perhaps that experience that had caused him to live such a solitary life. God aside, he'd never really been able to make another close friendship. Where's the priest? A woman who appeared to be the elderly woman's daughter asked Lucian as he approached the bed. You can't be the priest. You're not dressed like a priest. And with those simple words, she refused to allow him to do his duty. He had lost a soul to purgatory that night. He had forgiven the daughter a long time ago, but himself he had never forgiven. He had carried the burden ever since. It was on that night that he had turned his back on the church, and for a long time he had wandered, lost, a confused man who felt betrayed by his master, his only confidant, and yet desperately desired a sign that he still cared. And he had found that sign, glinting one day in a rain-filled gutter, a small silver cross pendant. As he had reached down to pick it up, the rain had stopped, and a bright rainbow had appeared in the sky. If you were to observe him as he removed his shirt before his evening prayers, you'd see the cross on his necklace, along with the miraculous medal that his grandmother had squeezed into his palm the morning of his first communion. You'd also see the scars on his body, where he'd punished himself for so long. Although his faith had been restored that day, he was deeply aware that the scars he now carried with him, both visible and invisible, would never heal. He glanced at the sky, then began moving down the path with a weary determination, drawn by an unknown force. He looked fragile now, weak, and each step he took looked as if it was all he could do. The bitter wind tugged aggressively at his collar, and the icy rain scratched at his pale face. If you were to look closely, you would have observed a slight shakiness about him, although it was hard to discern if he was shivering from the cold or if he was suffering from some kind of ailment. Everything about the way he moved suggested a man whose time was limited, and yet he did not appear to be advanced in age. To say that his surroundings spoke of death would be a statement of the obvious, for this was a cemetery in the cold grip of late autumn. But even taking that into account, you couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of sadness at the picture of desolation and decay. In every direction you looked, you could see broken and fallen tombstones, the only reminders of abandoned graves. There were remnants of broken vases here and there, but long gone were the days when flowers had brought colour to this place. In front of him, what had once been a cherubim stood on a plinth. Although the wings were still intact, the forlorn figure had no head and had lost an arm. Whether through neglect or vandalism, it was hard to tell, but it was nonetheless the epitome of a fallen angel. Behind it, a large stone cross had collapsed onto another. If you were familiar with the Stations of the Cross, which had been made to study so many times as a young boy, it was hard not to see the resemblance. In the middle distance, the tower of what remained of the derelict church loomed out of the darkness, its fearsome Gothic turrets almost snagging against the heavy sky. A few jagged pieces of glass were all that was left of the once mighty windows, which now looked like dark abysses leading to an unseen beyond. He slowly made his way to a jagged, neglected gravestone at the far corner and knelt before it, the long damp grass soaking his trousers and drenching his hands. He began to pick at the moss covering the inscription, slowly at first, then faster, frantically. His soft fingertips began to bleed, the vermilion blood the only colour in this miserable monochromatic microcosm. Tears began to fall from his eyes, although by now they were hard to differentiate from the rain that was falling relentlessly and running in rivulets down his moribund face. Finally he managed to get the last of the moss off the tombstone and slowly ran his shredded fingertips over the inscription. A cold chill ran down his spine as he realised that his worst nightmare had come true. As the last of the light expired and darkness descended, Lucian collapsed to the ground beneath a headstone that bore his name. Thank you. Well, I'd like to say thank you to everybody who's come here today. Thank you to everybody who's made the effort to put together such fantastic outfits. I said I'd encourage everybody to turn up in fancy dress, and it's just fantastic to see these people in front of me. It really is. Dress like this every day, folks. Please, really, I want to see this, okay? There will be one more performance by Marie-Anne Coe with her final story of tonight. But before that, once again, a huge thank you to everybody who's come tonight. Give yourselves a round of applause. A huge thank you to Andy behind the bar for keeping us suitably supplied tonight and for hosting this fantastic event.
Best costume of the night. Best costume.
Yeah, we should have had a best costume award. I didn't think of that. We'll come back next year for that. Okay. Thank you also to everybody who took part in the story writing competition. Whether or not you are here tonight, I'm really, really grateful to see so many people engaging. Some people writing for the first time, people taking part in a competition like this for the first time, performing for the first time. It's really fantastic to be part of that.
Recording for the first time.
Recording for the first time. I'll get to you. Hey, well, that nudge, wink, wink. A huge thank you, of course, to Camille and Camilla for looking after all the imaging tonight, the film and stuff like that. Sterling effort. I can't wait to see what footage comes out tonight. I think it's going to be fantastic. I will put that on the Facebook, wordworx Facebook, as soon as it becomes available, so keep an eye out there, look out for yourselves.
Hurry up, I have to change the battery.
Yeah, batteries dying, things like that. Yeah, I'm not sure what happened to that. Might be the ghosts playing in the works. Okay. Finally then, there are some books on display from Marie-Anne Coe. This is how Marie-Anne Coe earns a living, it's how she pays her bills. If you do have some spare change, talk to Marie, buy one of her books or find out where you can buy them. But please show support for this tremendous author who has sort of held everything together tonight and been a fantastic guest and my headline performer. So I'm going to introduce to the stage for one more time Marie-Anne Coe with her main piece for tonight.
This is called Dying to be Scared. Try an escape room, they said. It will be scary, they said. Oh, I sure hope so. It's not that I'm nervous or scared or anything, because I'm not. It's just that I so desperately want to be scared that I will pretty much try anything. I was so jealous when they all came back saying how they'd been scared out of their wits that I just had to give it a go. I had to feel what they felt. I yearned to feel what they felt. The trouble was, I didn't want to do what everyone else had done. I couldn't really, as I knew it wouldn't hit the spot. For one thing, I don't follow the crowd, never have, never will. For another thing, I don't scare. I had to try and find something that stood a chance of scaring me, even if only in a small way. I so wanted to feel that adrenaline surge, that dopamine release. When I saw the invitation to enter the dungeons of my mind where only the bravest and strongest will survive, I decided there and then that I was in. I'd heard of the author, Clufair B. Starn. I'd had to have been in a coma not to, but I'd never read any of its books. I say it's because no one knows if C.B. Starn is male or female. Now, I tend to roll my eyes at pretentious crap like that, and as I stand here now, I wonder if I will meet the elusive author when I survive the escape room. When I arrived at the abandoned asylum, surrounded by razor wire and patrolled by guard dogs and a caretaker whose friends had resided inside him for far too many years, part of me considered turning back, especially when he shook his head and engaged in a conversation I wasn't party to when I showed him my invitation, but I didn't. My desire to feel what everyone else felt drove me forward. I thought that the word dungeon in the invitation was just a way of making it sound that much more sinister. But as I look down the dimly lit steps into the gaping darkness at the bottom, I shiver, the hairs on the back of my arms deciding now is a good time to alert me to what may lie beneath. I like that feeling of apprehension, the start of a journey of terror, and my desire to see what C.B. Starn has created drives me forward. After all, I've been waiting a long time for something, anything to scare me, and I mean really scare me. And maybe, just maybe, this will be it. I take a step down and nearly tumble to the bottom as my foot slips on the mildewed steps. I grab the handrail and right myself, my hand hovering over my chest as I take a deep breath and try and slow my racing heart. Calm again, I descend, with care, into the darkness. I have to say I am impressed at the level of detail the illustrious author has gone to. The dark slabs of stone making up the floor and walls run with rank water, allowing slime to breed in the flow. The damp and musty smell emanating from within hints at decaying earth and the secrets it holds. As I step forward, what look like old-fashioned torches, with wooden handles and paraffin-soaked rags around the tops, light the way, casting an eerie yellow glow down what now reveals itself to be a long corridor. There are doors down one side, and as I move forward, wondering when my host will materialise, I notice that each door is different. I can hear the sound of crying coming from behind one of them, and my instinct draws me to it. I press my ear to the flaking red paint, and sure enough, there are sobs coming from behind it. Hello? Are you okay? Hello? A small voice comes back, the voice of a child. What's wrong? Who put you in here? I rattle the handle, but the door is locked. I always come here, came the girlish voice. Who locked you in? Come sit with me a while. I can help you, she says. Help me with what? My sentence hangs as the sound of a howl echoes down the corridor. As awful as this sounds, my desire draws me towards the howling, so real, so close, and I leave the little girl to her sorrow. I'll come back, I think. Maybe. The howling continues and I feel the goosebumps erupt across my skin as I draw close to the next door, a rusted iron one, similar to the old prison doors, complete with a Judas hole. Unable to stop myself, not that I want to, I draw close and reach out to slide the window cover aside. Through it, I can see the night sky speckled with stars, a full moon illuminating what appears to be a field or a moor. Quick, we have to move! An agitated voice catches my attention and I press forward, looking to my left. I see two figures dressed in walking gear and thick coats come into view, their breath pluming in the cold air. I'm tired, my knee really hurts, says one, of the duo as they walk past me and start to move away. "We can't stop it, it'll catch us, can't you hear it?" "I know, but I can't." "You go out." "No, I'm not leaving you." "Ah!" I jump as they scream, the deep guttural howl so close that I turn, expecting to see it behind me. "Hey, this way!" I call and try to open the door, but again it's locked. They don't hear me anyway. It's as though they are in a movie I'm watching. "Oh my God," one of them says as they both start to back away. I turn to the left again as I hear heavy breathing coming from next to me, followed by the stench of fetid breath. I gag and clamp my hand over my mouth, unable to tear my gaze away as a huge wolf pads into view, its eyes red, its teeth bared, its intent clear. "Over here," the uninjured walker says, brandishing a branch at the beast, which stops and sits down on its haunches. I watch as the two walkers, for reasons unknown to me, seem to relax. I watch as the wolf hunkers down, preparing itself. "Run!" I scream, uselessly of course for several reasons, and I stare, breath held, as the wolf launches itself at the one with the branch, pinning him to the ground before ripping his throat out. The injured one is backing away towards me, blocking my view. I jump away from the door as his body slams into it and his screams echo down the long corridor. I tentatively walk forward again and look through the window, trying to keep my distance. I can't see anything, nor hear anything. I draw a little closer and come onto my tiptoes so I can see some of what lies directly behind the door. Two legs come into my line of sight, one of them twitching every so often. They jolt and start moving as though being dragged. I scream, I can't help it. The body stops and I hold my breath, not daring to move. Hearing nothing, I lift one foot to start my retreat when a red eye appears at the window. I scream again, losing my footing and landing hard on the wet, slimy floor. I stare, my heart racing, my adrenaline pumping, my body shaking as the wolf hurls its weight against the door. Stone chips fall into the floor as it does so. Every so often it looks at me through the window before bringing its snout to the hole and sniffing the air. All I can think is that I need to close the window to block its view. I close my eyes and take a deep breath. I ease myself along the rancid floor and then slide myself up the wall to standing. My hand shaking, I slowly reach out and place my fingers against the hatch. Quick or slow, decisions. To hell with it, I say, and shove the hatch across, sealing the scene again. All becomes calm. I bend forward, resting my hands on my knees as I try to calm myself and regain composure. The adrenaline is flowing, the excitement building. I smile. A movement to my left catches my eye and I turn my head to see with whom I now share this dark, damp space. I relax and exhale as relief floods through me. Is it the white coat that calms me? Is it the sight of a man rather than a creature? To be honest, I don't care. This could be my host at last. I plaster a smile on my face as I stare at the back of this man. A doctor, perhaps. Why else would he be wearing a white coat? "Hello, excuse me," I say, and the man raises his head, but keeps his back to me. He does, however, drop his hands to his sides. I step forward, hand outstretched, ready to introduce myself, and the light from a lamp catches whatever is in his left hand, sending a harsh flash into my eyes, and I shy away. He starts to turn, and my voice catches in my throat as my gaze settles on the metal object clutched in his fist. A shiny metal object with a dangerous edge. A scalpel. I start to back away, my gaze now fixed on his face. A grin decorates his angular features as he looks up at me, his chin tucked into his chest, a manic look in his eyes. He doesn't follow me, though. Instead, he stops outside a new door and reaches his right hand towards it and gestures for me to open it. I shake my head, not trusting any words to come out, but I do stop my retreat. I squint in the half-light from the lantern. Is that blood I can see speckling the front of his coat? For some stupid reason, I lean forward, angling my head for a better look. He grabs me by the throat and drags me forward until we're face to face, until I can smell the stale sweat and death that clings to his clothing, until I can see deep into his eyes, eyes that look through me, eyes that look past me, Eyes that look at something else, something I could be, something he wants me to be. He forces me forward, the door swinging back under my weight and crashing against the wall. I struggle to keep upright as this man, who doesn't look capable of lifting much, drags me across the room and throws me into a metal chair. I cry out as my spine connects with the unyielding metal, and I close my eyes to quell the dizziness resulting from the back of my head slamming against the headrest. "Get off me! What are you doing?" I say as I feel restraints tightening around my ankles and try to kick out, but I'm held firm. I reach forward, intent on freeing myself, intent on getting out of here. Oof! My resilience is met with a punch to the sternum, which sends me crashing against the back of the chair, winding me. I struggle against him, but his slightness is deceiving, and he easily overpowers me and straps my wrists down. He yanks my hair and pinions my head so he can secure a strap around my forehead, holding me at such an angle to expose my neck while still enabling me to see straight ahead. He stands before me now and cackles, the laughter sending shivers through me. My eyes, wide and staring, are fixed on the scalpel which now dances before my face. "Before we begin," he says, his voice rasping, "I'd like to introduce you to some new friends." He steps out of my field of vision, bowing as he does so. Oh, no, let me go. This time, my scream isn't a reaction to the pain he has inflicted. It is a precursor to what is to come. Before me, mounted on the wall like game, hangs the severed heads of 6 people. I vomit, the restraints preventing me from leaning forward. I can feel it dribbling down my chin, and I have to spit to empty my mouth to try and abort a replay. The sinew and tissue hang from the base of each neck, as though the head has been torn from the body, the look in their now glassy eyes making me shudder. At the centre of this macabre display hangs a board still bare, except for the plaque at its base. A plaque engraved with my name. Let me go now. This is not what I signed up for. People know where I am. I will be missed. I let my monologue trail off. He isn't listening. He doesn't care. Time for some fun, he says. Ow! I pull away as I feel a scratch on my neck, followed by some pressure and an acute burning sensation. I shake my head as my vision starts to cloud, and I can feel drool begin to form in the corners of my mouth. My body starts to go limp, like jelly. The only thing holding me upright are the restraints. I fight against my closing eyelids, but have no choice but to succumb to the darkness. I blink rapidly and try and pull away from the harsh light burning its mark into my corneas. Ah, good. You're awake. It's better for you to be awake. For me, anyway. I hear him say, "Ah!" I try and speak, but I can't. I have something stuffed into my mouth, something which tastes of a familiar smell. Cloves. "I need you awake, dearie, but I need peace for my work," he says and pats me on the forehead. I try to pull away from him, his touch making me shudder, but I can't. I remain subdued. Head, wrists, ankles. One thing is new though, I realise, and try to curl in on myself as he traces his finger along my torso, over my pubic area and down my left leg. I am naked. No clothes, no underwear, no shoes. I try and cry out, forgetting my close-sodden gag, and almost swallow the cloth as I inhale. My gag reflex kicks in as my body tries to clear the blockage in my throat, and tears stream from the corners of my eyes, blurring my vision. Now, dearie, I don't want you dying on me. Not yet. It would spoil my fun," he says, and plucks the rag from my mouth. I cough and gasp for air at the same time, exacerbating my coughing fit. He doesn't offer me water. He doesn't offer me assistance. He simply waits until I am calm again. Barely have I brought my breathing back under control, then he shoves the cloth back into my mouth. "And now to begin," he says, and my eyes widen at the sight of the raised scalpel glinting in the glare. I feel the incision start around my left nipple, and I cry out into the rag and try and twist my body away from him, away from the scalpel, away from his torture. All I can do is watch in the tiny mirror he has erected for just such a purpose. I fight against my body's reaction of creating black and white dots before my eyes. I have to see. I watch as he slowly cuts away and removes each of my nipples. I watch as a smile spreads across his face. I watch as he turns and picks up a tub of white crystals and rubs a pinch into my flesh where my nipples once were. Ah! It is here I cease to watch. The tears fill my eyes and I try to howl against the pain, almost choking on the rag again. This time he doesn't help me though. This time he's focused on rubbing salt into my wounds. I fight to cough the rag out of my throat as the nerve endings in my torso start to go numb. I feel him stop rubbing and I relax, but only for a moment. The moment it takes for him to pick up his scalpel and start working again. I'm crying now as I mentally follow the strokes of his scalpel. Part of my brain curious to know what he's doing. Part of my brain never wanting to know. I will my nerves to numb. I will my senses to shut down. Then it stops. I open my eyes and feel my face relax. I hadn't even realised I was tensing up. I'm starting to feel woozy, and my unsevered nerve endings inform me that I'm losing blood. This only serves to kickstart my adrenaline and make my heart pump faster, fight or flight, which is not what I need. I close my eyes and focus, intent on survival, my basic human instinct, and will my heart to slow down, will my body to respond. Just as I think I'm taking control, I hear a switch being flicked and then a rasping noise, staccato, as though something is trying to start. My body responds before my brain. Adrenaline starts pumping again and my heart thuds in my chest. Something wet lands with a slap on my cheek, making me jump. I open my eyes and stare straight up at the rotating blade of the circular saw. Again, I try and pull away, trying to curl up and make my body as small as possible, trying to get out of the way of the saw, but I can't. I am bound too tightly, yet still I try. It's human nature. 1,000 thoughts are racing through my mind as he reaches up and drags the saw away from my head and down my body to my waist. My gaze follows him and I cannot even contemplate what he's going to do until he moves the saw to the left, and then I know. I go to ball my hand into a fist, but he stops me. I howl and gasp for air, choking on the rag as he hammers a nail through the back of my hand into the block of wood I hadn't noticed he'd put there. The trauma makes the muscles and tendons release and my fingers splay out. The choking means my attention is now elsewhere. That's all he needs. He has me in position. Before I can process what is happening, he pulls the saw down and very slowly, very carefully, he starts to cut through my fingers. My eyes roll back in my head and nausea sweeps through me as I feel the saw juddering briefly against my bones. I try and open my mouth and gag as my body tries to expel the rag and the vomit that has been triggered. Black and white dots begin to form before my eyes and the sound of the saw takes on that hollowness that all things do just before you faint. As the sounds in the room get further away and the white spiralling starts against the black background of my vision, I am vaguely aware that he has moved further down my body to my feet. An hour later, the doctor steps back from his masterpiece and admires his work. 7 heads now adorn the wall. 7 heads for 7 sins. Envy comes in many guises, and a comeuppance is always due. Wishing to be scared, wanting more than anything to feel what others feel, has its price. In his book, anyway. He sits down in front of his computer and takes down the invitation. His party is over, for now.